Have you just recently been laid off, or are you maybe thinking about making a career change? Then you're going to want to pause what you're doing right now. Maybe you're already, jumping in and searching for jobs. I can tell you that the next half hour is going to be much more valuable than that. I am joined here. I'm very excited to be joined by Elle McPherson. She is a transformational coach. She specializes in helping leaders become change makers and find their passion. And Elle, thank you so much for joining. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. I'm excited to be here. I just arrived back in Argentina where I live, so I'm a digital nomad. And that's why we had to change this because my flight got changed. So such is the life of living abroad. So my background, I previously worked in the international nonprofit space doing finance and operations. And about 5 years ago, I quit my job. I sold everything. I traveled backpacking for 6 months. And since that time, I've become a coach. So I work with leaders and helping them become more conscious. And another passion of mine is working with people who are taking sabbaticals or time off to travel and learn more about themselves.
Awesome. And for those of you who are new to me, I do this weekly live show. My name is Susie Chow. I am the creator of Live Abroad for a Month, which helps people, exactly as it says, live abroad for a month or more, even with the house and the job and the kids and the pets and all of the things that, we are very happy to have. But the people that I help are looking to make a shift, have some more freedom in their life to actually be able to enjoy their life. And before that, before I started this company, I worked for 2 large consulting companies. Did that for about 13 years. And the reason why we're having this discussion centered around layoffs in particular is because both of those companies in the last month or two have announced some pretty big layoffs. So it's impacted a lot of people in my circle. And I already had this conversation with Elle lined up, and we knew we could take this conversation in many different ways, but especially leaning on you being a transformational coach and kind of helping a lot of people through those career transitions as they contemplate, as you said, sabbaticals, career breaks, and just kind of making big shifts in their lives. I thought it would be awesome to be able to take this conversation. And I think that the best place to start off, before we do that, I want to know who is joining live. So if you are joining live or watching the replay, pop in the comments below where you're joining in from so we can say hi. And this is a very interactive conversation. So at any point in what we're saying, please, put in your questions or comments. We want to hear your feedback so we can address anything that's coming up for you during this conversation. So the first thing I think that we were talking about that we wanted to share is to just kind of meet where you're at, especially if the layoff is real fresh. And I think for some of you that is the case because the one company just made some layoffs kind of effective immediately just in the last week. So, Elle, what would you tell those individuals? What do you think, they need to hear and be doing in this, very initial phase of that layoff?
Yeah. So I know we're going to get to this is an opportunity. And I think it's hard to really embrace the opportunity of something when you're still really in the feels around, especially something like a layoff. There might be that rare person that's super excited because they hated their job and they got a severance. But for a lot of people, so there could be excitement around it, but for a lot of people, being laid off can feel really hard. And I think really allowing yourself to feel those feels, because you've got to feel it to heal it. So it's really hard to get to that place of acceptance and opportunity when you're still maybe not fully in acceptance of what's happened. So I think whether you have whether it's friends or a coach or a therapist or whatever your community of support is, it's really important to really go into feeling whatever's come up around the layoff and realize that there's probably some value if you're conscious around what's coming up because you've been laid off. It could be, becoming more aware of your own feelings around scarcity and abundance, especially, right? Because if you had a financial secure job for a long time and all of a sudden you don't, that could bring up some real fears around finances. And that's something to be like, okay, where, can I learn here in terms of how much of a savings account I have, or how comfortable am I with financial insecurity? There's a lot to work with there. There could be stuff that comes up around feeling like betrayed. If you've worked for a company for a long time, and some resentment, some betrayal. For a lot of people, their job is very attached to their identity. And all of a sudden, if you don't have a job, that can really bring up stuff of like, who am I in this world? What's my value and my purpose in this life without my job? So there's that. And then there's, just like the social life too. Like a lot of us become friends with our coworkers. And all of a sudden, you're not seeing those folks every day who you spend a lot of time with. So all of those are really real. And I think it's worth examining or being conscious of, like, when you get laid off, what are the things that you're mourning? What are you grieving? What fears are coming up? There's a lot to learn in that about who you are and what's important to you, which will then be meaningful, or things to take into account as you're looking for your next thing.
Yeah. And if any of that resonated with you, I mean, it resonated with me for sure. A lot of those things just kind of live below the surface, right? And it's these big life events that bring those things up. And I think you're more forced to become aware. So if any of that resonated, give a like, a love to this post wherever you're watching. And I think the thing to show you there is you're not alone in these feelings. I think it can feel really isolating in the moment. And I think a lot of it is just this like disappointment in this future that you thought and were planning around. And then all of a sudden it's just like stripped away from you. But I guess the thing that you can use that for is figuring out, okay, so if that's not my future anymore, what can be? And, maybe taking a step back and thinking bigger about, before you dive right into, searching for the job postings, like, what is that, feel the feels, as you said. And I loved what you said, you got to feel it to heal it. And I think being introspective about where some of those feelings are coming from to be able to kind of look a little bit deeper. But I would love to hear, Al, like your thoughts around maybe some initial steps to like, what can you do to heal it, and then maybe transition or bridge that gap to kind of figuring out and taking a step back at what that future is that you can create.
Mm-hmm. So to me, my answer is always be curious. So feelings are coming up, right? Whether it's anger, betrayal, sadness, grief, whatever. And just get curious about like, well, what is this, right? Like somebody else might have the exact same situation happen to them, and maybe they're happy about it. So why am I grieving this? Or like, what am I, there's anger. Okay, I'm feeling this anger about this, like curiosity about what that is, and then permission to feel it. So, anger, maybe you go to a rage room, maybe you go boxing, right? Like let that anger move through you. And as you're instead of just sort of unconsciously feeling the anger, like be conscious. Okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to like break stuff or punch a punching bag, and notice kind of like what thoughts are going through your mind, like what needs to move there. Because maybe it's who knows, maybe there's stuff from your unresolved stuff from your past that this is bringing up, right? The sense of anger or betrayal or losing family, right? There could be like deeper stuff that this event is bringing up, and it's just being really curious and open to what this has to teach you is basically what I'm saying. And then the other question I would have is to be mindful of like the questions you're asking yourself, because especially in a layoff or when anything bad happens to us, we can go to the question like, well, why me? And when you ask why me, it puts you in a very like victim. The answers you're gonna get are gonna be victim answers, like because I was a bad person or because I did something. No, like that's not a good place to go. So your mind will answer the questions that you ask it. So instead of going to the why me, I'd like to, and this is kind of shifting to like, okay, I felt the feels. Can I get to a place of being more opportunistic about this? Like, instead of asking like, why is this happening? Being like, what could this teach me? Or what could I learn from this? Or if this was like the best gift I could have ever gotten from spirit, universe, God, whatever you call it, in disguise, what does this gift have for me? And like, it might take a while to get to that place, but when you start considering it that way, like asking those questions, what could I learn from this? How could this be the best thing that ever happened in my life? Your mind will start to get creative. You'll start to get some answers.
Yeah. Oh, I love just the fact, just taking that step of asking yourself better, more productive questions. Because of course the first ones are always why me, why this, why now, all of those things that can just kind of suck you deeper down into the feels that you're feeling. But being able to have the power and be able to redirect those questions and ask yourself questions that can really result in being able to move yourself forward and thinking about it in a more, opportunistic way. And, I think I would love to hear maybe some client stories, like other, because you work with people that are in, either this situation, whether it's something that was not voluntary at like a layoff, but some people are, choosing to make big career changes and, they want to take some time off in order to do that. I would love to hear any kind of client stories of the journey that kind of people went through. I think that might be helpful to kind of show some examples of how people did turn, maybe an unfortunate situation into something positive.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of like folks I've worked with who kind of consciously took a sabbatical. So I think it is, I want to like preface that it is a bit different when you've like been forced into it versus when you've chosen it. But in the end, once you kind of accept it, that it's the same situation. So it's like, okay, I'm taking time off. I think the biggest thing that sets people up for success is really being intentional about it. So like often when I work with people at the start of a sabbatical type journey or taking time off or a break, it's really, I talk a lot about this idea of a container, meaning like you're really intentionally setting aside X amount of time. So it's like I'm taking 2 months off or whatever it is, because it can get really leaky if you don't do that. And you can't really be all in, right? So that's why I'm talking about like feel the feels, get to the acceptance piece. And then you can say, okay, I'm going all in. I got laid off or I'm choosing to take time off. And I'm going to give myself 2-3 months, whatever your thing is. It might be depend on your financial situation, your flexibility. But really giving yourself that like really clear boundaries of what this time is going to be for you. And it doesn't mean that, maybe you say, okay, I'm taking 2 months off. I'm going to like use my severance and go do whatever. And maybe you say, okay, and I'm going to spend 3 hours a week job searching or whatever, but like being really clear about what you want out of that time and then limiting the time that you're going to get, like, because like job searching can be a real time suck and a real soul suck as well. Yeah. So yes, you might need to be doing that while you're using the time off to like also pursue another passion, but just be really intentional about those boundaries. Because otherwise I think you're like half in, half out. And when I work with clients in the past, where they really have success is because they gave permission, is the big word here. They gave themselves permission to go all in on whatever it is that they're doing, whether that's just like traveling, which is something that you help folks with, or going to do like a meditation retreat or whatever it is that they want to pursue during this unexpected time off or planned time off. But I'm like, it's just so easy to kind of get sucked back into all the busyness of work or job searching, because that's often where we're comfortable. And so you really have to give yourself permission and then kind of like have the diligence to stay in that discomfort of whatever it is that you've chosen to do during your time off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm thinking about some of my clients who have chosen to take a sabbatical or a career break, depending on their job, if they completely quit or if maybe they're just taking an extended leave of absence, which is something that I did. So I guess my story is 10 years ago, my husband got laid off because the company he was working for got acquired by another larger company. So they completely closed the Chicago headquarters. We were living in Chicago at the time. And we didn't want to relocate. I mean, that was pretty much the only option. And that was not interesting to us. Just wasn't the timing we wanted to continue our lifestyle where we were at. And it wasn't immediate, but the wheels started turning, and I had this sabbatical seed like way in the back of my head. I mean, back from like traveling and staying in hostels in my 20s and meeting all these people who were traveling long term. And at the time, I was said, well, that sounds great. I love that idea, but that's not for me. I couldn't do that. At the time, I'm like 25. I've got a super important job. Look at me. But that still stayed in the back of my head. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of came to the forefront. And I said, maybe this is an opportunity, turning lemons into lemonade. And I said to my husband, I said, well, you can find a new job now, or you could find a new job later. And it took many months. I've got a whole other LinkedIn Live on how I took him from that conversation to actually doing it. But we chose later, and we use that as an opportunity. And I'm not saying that, that's exactly what I suggest to everybody, because it was something that I think is dependent on a lot of things, your risk tolerance, stage in life, financial flexibility, all of these things. However, what I help clients with now is living abroad for a month. And I think that is very doable, especially with an extended severance. And if you have some rainy day funds saved up. The way I look at it from a financial perspective, the way I work with clients, it's slow travel. So usually it ends up being essentially a financial swap of whatever you would spend on a big vacation, your like 1 or 2 week vacation. You're just stretching those dollars over the course of a month. But the reason why I say that is, and I talked about that, is because I think that just the act of physically being in a different environment, when you're traveling, you're thinking different thoughts, you're forced to think differently. I mean, just where's the grocery store, like little things. So you're outside of your comfort zone already. And I think that just expedites some of the answers and clarity, to be able to figure out like, what do I want? Because it can be really hard, like sitting at home at your desk that you used to be working at that job. And then now all of a sudden it's like you're breaking your routine. And you might be kind of feeling guilty, like you have to go back to, your home office and search for a job from 9 to 5. But for most people, that's actually not the most productive, but they just don't necessarily take the time and a break to think bigger. Yeah. And like clarity. Yeah, I guess maybe you could get a little bit of clarity by seeing job posts and saying, I like that one, I don't like that one. But that's kind of it sucks up a lot of energy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, job searching can be really soul sucking.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I agree with you. When you get out of the day-to-day routine, like most of us, we get these, I call them like the blinders. Like you're in this little routine, you go through your day, and if you maybe like you no longer have the job, but if you're in that same more or less routine, it's really hard to start thinking differently. And especially as most Americans have like 2, max 3 weeks off, it's not enough time really like to really get away from your job and let your brain start to like think differently, which is, I think, like when I quit my job and traveled for 6 months, I was backpacking, but my brain started to remember like things that I had been passionate about when I was in university or when I was younger. All these ideas came back to me, like entrepreneurial ideas, all these passions that I'd kind of been like, no, like that's not practical, or and it kind of reignited. And plus you meet people, right? Like I had been living in Washington, DC for 6 years and kind of gotten this like more narrow view of like what my life options were. And I had the sense there was more out there, but I just didn't have like good examples of it. And so when I quit and I traveled, what was one really valuable thing among many about that was I met plenty of people who were living really different lifestyles, who were all like successful, happy, and just in different ways than like the traditional like East Coast rah-rah that I had been living in. And that also gave me a lot of permission to do the lifestyle that I live now, to be like, oh, there's so many different ways of being and living in this world that are totally acceptable, but it's hard to even know that they're there until you see them. So I definitely think that, like, to your point about travel or just doing something different, it can just completely it's a different perspective. It gets your brain thinking differently and gives you permission and ideas of different ways of living that you might have sort of just, like you said, oh, I did that when in my 20s, that was cool. But, now I'm an adult. I'm in my 30s or 40s. Like, I can't do that anymore. But it's really is giving yourself permission to remember these things that are meaningful to you.
So much. And one statistic I want to throw out, I think that might help, again, shift some perspectives, is that out of the course of an average career timeline, 6 months is 1% of that time. So thinking about, and especially if the layoffs, obviously that's involuntary, you were not expecting to be in this position, but I think seeing it as a chance to again, especially if you have the financial flexibility to go and explore and do these things that maybe you just didn't have time to do. And yes, that could be travel, it could be other things too, but opening up and using some creativity that you probably haven't used in that way for many, many years, I think just changes some like neural pathways and opens up your mind to different opportunities and perspectives that can make all the difference to getting the clarity that you need to figure out like what's that best next step for you in life. But I think what you were saying about giving yourself permission, it takes you giving yourself permission to do that, and not just jump into the job search because you think that that's what you're supposed to do. And that's honestly, that's what society tells you is like, okay, you need a job, you get a job because you're supposed to work until you retire. And
right.
There's, as you said, you go, when you traveled around during your sabbatical, you saw, oh, well, there's a lot of different ways to make a life, and to live life. And the way that you have been doing it, it's good to reflect, like, were you super stressed out all the time? Were you on the verge of burnout or maybe already burnt out? Like, if that's the case, like, just rest. I mean, for everybody that I talk to that's like truly burnt out, it takes like a month or two to literally just like sleep
Yeah.
and not think and not make decisions. And, if you're in that place, like honor that, because if you just push ahead, then you're not actually solving the problem. So yeah, I mean, I think that just opening up your mind to what you actually do want in life. I was going to say this later on at the end of the call, I'll reiterate it, but the first thing that I do with my clients is a goal setting exercise, just to, again, open up the mind to all the possibilities of what could be, and then go through and try to prioritize that, like what's going to be the most impactful. And I think that exercise, although I kind of created it in a mindset of, traveling is the lens. If you do go live abroad for a month, like what do you want to do at that time? But it could be for anything. It's definitely applicable. So just send me a DM if that is something that you're interested in. You could just simply type the word goals and I'll send it to you. It's not a funnel. It's nothing. I genuinely just want to help you. So please just reach out. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, send me a DM there, or Facebook, etc. But I want to just kind of switch back into, if people are thinking about doing something that, is a bit looser, or maybe a good question to ask. And if there's anybody watching, definitely let us know, because we do have a few more minutes for questions. But the question that's coming up in my mind, if you're really struggling to give yourself permission to do these things that you want to do, like, Elle, what would you say to those people?
So this is funny you said that, because yes, I'm talking about permission. And I also believe that we are social creatures. So like in my personal story, when I first quit my job, I really didn't know. I knew I needed to stop doing what I was doing, but I didn't know what was next. But I also knew that if I waited till I figured it out, I was going to get depressed and it wasn't going anywhere good. So I kind of forced myself to quit my job, and I went and I studied yoga for a month. I'd always wanted to study yoga. So I went, and that was my, like, giving myself permission to do that. And also just take a break and, like, be in a residential community where there was no phones. And so that was like how I kind of like made the shift from like, I quit my job on a Friday and by Sunday I was in this yoga place. So that was like how I kind of forced myself to just not look at my work anymore. But then I still struggle with, like, I'd had this dream for years of traveling, kind of like what you had said, but I had thought, like, well, I can't do that. And actually it was my brother at the end who was like, you always wanted to do this. Why don't you do this? And like literally the next day I bought a ticket to what is now Myanmar. So I think sometimes, like, yes, you give yourself permission, but I think sometimes we just need also permission from, we don't even maybe realize we need permission from the people we love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes too, it can be like having these conversations with people that you care about and saying, I'm in this kind of in between space. These are the dreams I've had, like starting to talk about it, because you'd be surprised, maybe who you're in casual conversation with someone in the grocery store or on the plane or and you mention something and they're like, oh, actually, I know someone who can help you, or I did that too, or let me give you a resource. So by saying what you're dreaming out loud, the universe will kind of conspire to help you. And you might just get the permission that you need from, whether it's a loved one or like somebody outside. Because I think in the end of the day, sometimes we need that external push.
Yes. And that is absolutely the truth. I had a couple on a few weeks ago. They're now on their 3-month sabbatical, and it was the same thing where they started talking about it to friends and family, and they took action by, reaching out and working with me. And this was before they had the, official approval from their jobs, but they got it. Mm-hmm. I think that there is something so powerful to saying, to just, well, I guess even a step before that is just to declare what you do want.
Yeah.
And then communicating that, and then taking like little baby steps towards that. Because I do think that, like you said, the universe, whatever you believe, it wants to help you. Right. And I think that, again, just seeing this as an opportunity to make shifts, to do those things that you've wanted to do for years, but timing hasn't really been right. Like now, job is definitely not a restriction. Yes, thinking about the next job, but especially for anybody who is looking for maybe remote only jobs, you can for sure search for a remote only job anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. You can take those interviews, you can do those things. That is not a restriction. Obviously, if you are searching and you want something that is office or hybrid, maybe it's that month, you take that month, you do that, and then you come back. But you have that at least month to think bigger thoughts, not be, to just really have that open mind with what you do want. Because I think that, at least for myself personally, and I took that year-long career break, but also several month-long breaks. And each one I've had different, realizations and clarity coming to mind that, I feel strongly, I don't think that I would have had those same thoughts at home. Mm-hmm. Because also travel, just, you are doing different things, being in a different environment. It's just such a powerful way and such a quick way to just make those shifts very, very quickly. Kevin, I love that. He says a saying in our house that hopefully helps here is, what's the best that could happen?
Yeah.
So instead of just thinking about what's worst case scenario, like what's the best case scenario? And that is, again, such a powerful shift to be able to think bigger. And I think that helps us take risks. Because I know for me for sure that year, that was a huge risk that society was like, you're crazy for doing this. And, I didn't think that it was like a smart thing financially, and, but it was something that I desired so badly that it, helped me push past those fears. And I'm so, so happy that I did it. And that's, I think same story for you. It's like taking those risks is what allows you to get the confidence to take other risks in life and do things differently. I mean, I feel very strong. I would have never started my business if I didn't take that career break 10 years ago, because I was very much on the straight and narrow. You go to a good school, you get a good job, and like you
Yep.
life in that way. And I think especially post-COVID, people are thinking a little bit more differently about what they value. But one point I wanted to make, especially in terms of aligning values with your next step decisions, is the clearer you get on values. And a talk I did, I know a lot of people listening are from Slalom. So my very first LinkedIn Live a couple months ago was with Jess Felt. And that one was really about getting clear on values and designing that life that you want before, getting the job. So that one would be very applicable. DM me if you need the link to that. I would be happy to share that with you. And I think that is so important too, about like before just diving in and, searching for job roles. It's like really getting clear on what you value the most. And I think some of you, have a family, and I've talked with some clients where, they don't want to be spending like tons of money, but I think of it as, especially with children, if you want to raise global citizens and you want to give them the opportunities to see other cultures and, have those experiences that maybe push them outside of their comfort zones, that is an investment in them that I think will have a massive ROI in the end. So just another mindset shift around, how you spend your money. And I strongly believe travel does not need to be expensive. So that's why earlier in the call, if you didn't catch, I really think a month away is approximately a swap of, your typical 1 or 2 week vacations, staying in hotels. You just swap that out for a longer stay in like a home rental where you're really more living like a local.
Or also, I wanted to like, there's some people who might be considering the digital nomad thing, and I can speak a little bit to that. Like, I live in Argentina, where the cost of living is significantly less than in the US. So I actually have my house in the US rented out, and what I get in rent there is significantly more than what my rent is here. So especially if you're looking at like a month or more, and this is going to depend on your kids, and lots of things. But if you can afford or have the flexibility to, like, let's say, rent your house out in the US, I'll rent your car out. Like, you make a decision to do something, that's when the creativity kicks in. You're like, okay, now I've decided I'm going to do this. Then your mind starts getting like, oh, I know this person there, and there's this thing, and I could do that. And all of a sudden it starts like coming together. So maybe you rent your house out and you live somewhere with a lower cost of living, right? And you can do it longer. Or you want to go freelance and you're not sure what your income might be as you get going. Again, living somewhere with a lower cost of living can kind of give you a little more flexibility as you're, like, let's say, starting your own business or something, where you don't have that financial pressure that you have because you're living in like San Francisco, which is really expensive. So once you start just like allowing yourself, again, the permission, making the decision, and then like getting creative, how can I make this work? You'll make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you bring up a good point that most people would see, going to travel for a long period of time as more risky, but from a financial standpoint, especially if you go all in, the expenses are significantly lower, where it's actually less financial risk. Again, now that there's so many remote job opportunities where you truly can work from anywhere, that's a real possibility. If you're really looking for location independence, more time freedom, there are jobs to support that lifestyle. So just thinking bigger, I think, about what's next. And especially, I think a lot of you are watching here on LinkedIn. There's whole communities out there that I've more recently tapped into, people that are talking about remote work from anywhere. Just like search those hashtags, being a digital nomad. If that's something that you're interested in, there's a whole whole bunch of content and creators out there that are talking about that I think would be really inspiring. If you are looking to travel, obviously I'm here. I can help solve all of those problems for you, the house, the pets, the car, etc. And especially if you're thinking about taking an entrepreneurial track, you will be very interested in next week's show, where I am going to be joined by Anna from Generation Nomads. She helps people start from the very beginning of an online business to support a digital nomad lifestyle. So you'll definitely want to tune into that. I'm going to do a last call for questions in the comments, but while anybody types in, Elle, how can people, if they are interested in getting to reach out to you, especially to explore those feels, I think you're an excellent resource to dig into that and dive into that, analyze that, and really get some clarity. So how can people get in touch with you?
I think the easiest way is just to send me a message on LinkedIn. That's what I love. That's my thing. It's helping people figure out, like, okay, what is the deeper feels here? If there's resistance to what's happening, and then that's when we feel the resistance, then we can get to that place of greater clarity, greater opportunity. So I, especially when it comes to sabbaticals or time off or things like this, I sort of view that first phase as like overcoming any fears, resistance, etc. Then there's like that possibility dreaming phase, and sometimes like it really helps to have someone to dream, to do the, to kind of like bounce the big ideas off and get some validation from someone outside of you. Like, I could do this, I could do that. Yeah, let's talk, let's make it bigger. Like, create the dreams. And then sometimes there's support like during that journey. And then I also love people on the integration piece. So I really want to pinpoint that, because sometimes we go on these adventures or journeys or do something different. But for it to really stick and become meaningful in our lives, we need that digestion integration piece. So as a coach, that's also a lot of what I work with people on, is like, okay, well, now what's the meaning of the value? What am I pulling out of that? And how do I actually turn that into action in my life?
Awesome. Wonderful. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I hope for the folks who just got laid off, like that they can take some of this to heart, and yes, feel those feels, because there's a lot to process. And this might have been the best thing that ever happened to you. This could be the moment that like changes your life. I think Susie and I can both speak to like how taking time off and traveling has totally impacted our lives, and in very different places than I would have been if I'd stayed on my traditional career track that I was on 10 years ago. So maybe this is that for you, and it's staying in that place of possibility, excitement, and hope about what this could become.
I love that. I love that so much. And if, one other question, unique advice for early versus older professionals. So there are some people that were impacted that were like very early on in their career, and then some that are like very late stage, like they're probably planning on just like riding it out to retirement. And now it's like that awkward, well, I guess not awkward, but it's just a shorter window to really consider.
Probably as an earlier, like you might feel like you have more flexibility, because it's like you were saying, right? Or I think you were saying like 6 months in the scheme of a career isn't that much. And I know when I first quit my job and I traveled, I committed to 1 month, because that felt like one month felt like a long amount of time, and then it became 6 months, and then at the end of my life, 6 months was nothing. So maybe when you're younger, it can feel like you have more time. And so I think there's a little more flexibility there, and also realizing that like most of us are going to have more than one career over our lifetimes in the current job market. For an older professional, I can definitely feel where the fear factor might be higher around the financial piece. And this might be a chance to reconsider, okay, I'm only going to work for X number of years more. How do I really want to spend those years? As opposed to just kind of being a little bit checked out and just like writing it out to retirement. Yes, that would have been convenient, but again, maybe this happened for a reason. Maybe there's something I still really want to do. Maybe I've always wanted to live in Mexico, it could be the jumpstart in doing something different.
And you may have more financial flexibility. So my friends and I, we joke about retirement phase 1, because I think that there's a group of us that want to retire early, still work, but doing something maybe not as like a high pressure job, like a consulting, maybe transition to something that's more of a passion project, that, if you're in that financial position, you wouldn't necessarily, you could do something like that past the traditional retirement age, because it's something that you really enjoy, or maybe something more entrepreneurial. I think that there's a lot of possibilities. I think it depends on your particular goals, and, if you're tied to a specific retirement age and you just want to earn as much as possible until then, or if you want to see it as, maybe a restructuring of that retirement, what retirement looks like. I think you could probably play it a couple different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, thank you for everybody who joined live or the replay. If you want to get in touch and learn more about Live Abroad for a Month, just send me a DM wherever you are watching, and I will get you some information so we can plan your month away in a month. So hopefully we can get you on the road real soon if you are in the position where you have the time flexibility to go pretty soon here. And the two other reminders, if you want to get that goals exercise that I had mentioned earlier, just DM me the word goals and I'll send that over to you along with your email address. And join me next week if you have some interest in more of an entrepreneurial path. I think that that's going to be a really good conversation with Anna to dive into what it takes to start a business online and, have the flexibility to travel while you do it. So Elle, thank you so much for joining me. Really, really loved your insights. I know I got some comments that they just loved your perspectives. And thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate you and your time, and have an excellent weekend.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Bye.
good one. Bye.